Hey guys, I want to share some reflections I've been recently having on the concept of freedom at the times of COVID. I asked myself, what is freedom? And the simplest answer that you could give is that you are free if you can do whatever you want. I've done some quick research and apparently this definition has a specific name, which is objective negative freedom. Basically, I'm free if I can choose to do whatever I want to do without anyone imposing any kind of constraints or restriction that would prevent me to do whatever I want to do. It goes without saying that this is an extremely simplistic definition, which would make sense only if I was alone in the universe. But since we are all part of the society, this concept doesn't really work, because otherwise I should be free to kill, to steal, basically to do actions that would impact the freedom of others. So the objective negative freedom, as a matter of fact, can't be applied in the society. And so we need another concept, which, to simplify, I will call constrained negative freedom. That is, I'm free to do whatever I want within the limits of not causing harm to other individuals, which is what John Stuart Mill, the father of classical liberalism, said. I would add to this, I can do whatever I want within the limits of not causing harm, not only to other individuals, but also to society. And I would extend the concept in the sense that not only must I not cause harm, but I must also not negatively impact the freedom of others. Does it make sense? Now, we are still talking about negative freedom. Then there is also positive freedom, which is a slightly deeper concept that would take a little more time, and so I will not talk about it in this video. Now, what has this to do with COVID? Well, a lot, because in the broader public conversation about COVID restrictions, these being COVID pass, face masks, social distancing, people very often mention the concept of freedom. And many argumentations are often the same in different countries. I'm Italian, but I live here in the UK, so I closely follow the evolution of the public narrative in the two countries. And I noticed that some of the argumentations for and against COVID restrictions are amazingly similar. The difference is that right now, in Italy, the line in favor of restrictions is winning. And I add, in my opinion, it is rightly winning. Instead, in the UK, the line that prioritizes individual freedom seems to be prevailing, at least for now. But wait a second, are we sure that less restrictions means more freedom and more restrictions means less freedom? Because look, it could be exactly the opposite. And from my point of view, it is the opposite indeed. And I'll give you a very concrete example. Here in the UK, only now in December 2021, with the Omicron crisis, some restrictions are being introduced. But we are still far, far away from the kind of restrictions that are in place in Italy and in other European countries. For those who don't know, right now in Italy, you need the COVID pass to go basically anywhere. Restaurants, pubs, bars, theaters, museums, all kinds of public transportation, even workplaces. And to get the green pass, you need to be either fully vaccinated, recovered from COVID, or tested negative in the last 48 hours. But if you got the test route, you need to get a supervised test, not just use a home kit like here in the UK. And to go to nightclubs, you even need the so-called super green pass. So basically, you need to have a booster jab. But let's go back to the UK. As I was saying, some restrictions are being reintroduced now. But until 2 weeks ago, there were 0 restrictions, 0 face masks, no COVID requirements, everything open, mass events, as if COVID didn't even exist. And in fact, the cases per million in the UK were 5 times more than in Italy, already before Omicron. Now, am I really free in this situation? Of course, I am free in the sense that I have no restrictions and therefore theoretically, I can go to a concert, to clubs, to bars, to restaurants. I can even use the public transportations without anyone interfering with my freedom to do so by telling me whether I should or I should not put on a face mask. But in practice, the absence of restrictions means I'm much less free, because I can assure you that until 2 weeks ago, when masks wearing was not really mandatory, every time I wanted to use the tube or take a bus here in London, I would think twice. And same thing for restaurants. This summer I was in Italy for a couple of months, and I felt much safer when I was going to restaurants and I was being asked to show a COVID pass for indoor dining. Here in England, even now, there are no restrictions for restaurants. And sure, I still go to restaurants, but I go less frequently and I feel less safe. So in my experience, my freedom has indeed been limited by the absence of restrictions. Now, let's put aside for a moment the debate on whether COVID passes are effective or not, or whether face masks are effective or not, because that would require a whole new video. To be clear, my opinion is that they are effective to a substantial degree when it comes to reducing the risks for individuals and the wider society. And there is enough scientific evidence to prove it. But that's another matter. I want to focus instead on the delicate balance between objective and negative freedom and constrained negative freedom. That is, on my freedom to do whatever I want and the constraints that I necessarily need to have because I have to be prevented from impacting the freedom of others. And an example that came to my mind while thinking about this is the ban on smoking in public places. Because now, all over Europe and also in many other parts of the world, we got accustomed that smoking is not allowed in public places. But let's remember that that hasn't been always the case. So this is a perfect example of a constraint that was imposed on the objective negative freedom, and not even that many years ago. And I remember the public debates at the time, and some of the arguments for and against that constraint were very similar to those used today with regards to COVID restrictions. Because there were those who would say, hey, you can't limit my freedom to smoke wherever I want. So if that bothers you, you go somewhere else. So objective negative freedom. And then those on the other side will say, well, dear smoker, you're very much free to smoke, but you go somewhere else because you cannot interfere with my freedom to be in a public place without running the risk of catching a respiratory disease. So, guys and gals, in the end of the day, it's a matter of finding the right balance. And of course, people have different points of view on toward which side we need to shift the balance and by how much. But ultimately, it comes to that. I will dare to say that decisions about shifting the balance should be made more based on scientific indicators, especially when it comes to public health, and less based on what people read on social media, on what political polls says, or on what is politically convenient at the moment. But anyway, I'm interested in your point of view, so feel free to leave a comment.